afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Honorable members of City Council, in accordance with the Virginia Beach City Code 2-21 and by the authority invested in me as mayor of the city of Virginia Beach, I hereby call for a special formal session of the Virginia Beach City Council on Tuesday, July 28, 2020 at 6 p.m. City Council Chambers, Building 1, City Hall, 2nd floor, 2401 Courthouse Drive. The purpose of the special session is for the City Council to consider the items listed on the published agenda. I also hereby call for a workshop and informal session of the City Council beginning at 2:30 at the same location, which consists of briefings, discussions, a closed session, and other items as detailed in the agenda. Citizens may comment either personally or virtually. If you would like to speak in person, call the city clerk's office at 757-385-4303 to sign up. Be advised that there is a limited seating available in City Council chamber to ensure social distancing as recommended by the CDC. If you wish to make comments virtually on an item, please follow the two-step process below. Register for the WebEx app, https://vbgov.webex.com, or register with the city clerk's office by calling 757-385-4303 or via email at abarnes@vbgov.com prior to 5:30 p.m. on July 28, 2020. This special formal session will be broadcast on cable TV at www.vbgov.com and Facebook Live. Citizens are encouraged to submit their comments to the City Council prior to the special meeting via email at citycouncil@vbgov.com. Sincerely, Bobby Dyer. Madam Clerk, I think we have to do a verbal roll call.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berlucci?
Present.
Councilmember Henley?
Present.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Present.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Here.
Mayor Dyer?
Present.
All present, Mayor, with Mr. Tower participating virtually.
Okay, at this point, at the request of council, as we go forward with multiple challenges in our city and our Commonwealth, it was requested that one of the items for discussion we have is a closer contacts with our members of the House of Delegates and Senate in Richmond. Especially with a number of things coming forward. They're going to be convening in August for a special session. But also, as we go continue forward with the needs of the city going forward, a better collaboration and communication, may be in order. So, at this point, Madam Clerk, could we introduce the participants we have for the delegation so far?
Yes, sir. May I first go over the instructions?
Oh, yes, by all means, please. We'll go. We'll just have the format of the discussions by the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council, and members of the Virginia Beach General Assembly delegation. This is Amanda Barnes, City Clerk. Councilmember Guy Tower, as well as members of the delegation, are participating electronically. Also, please note this meeting is being recorded. To ensure this live electronic event is successful, please note the following meeting instructions must be followed. Once the mayor opens the discussion, I will recognize the speakers in the order which they raise their hand, either in person or via the virtual hand. Councilmember Tower and the members of the delegation, please mute any additional devices you have in the room to avoid any unnecessary background noise and/or the possibility of echoing reverberation. Remember, should you wish to make a comment, you must raise your virtual hand. It is also important to lower your virtual hand at the conclusion of your comments. Once you are recognized, please wait 2 to 3 seconds before beginning your comments to ensure everyone can hear your complete remarks. Please do not ask, "Can you hear me?" as only one feed is open at a time to minimize the echo reverberation, and as such, you will be unable to hear a response. Once recognized, should the speaker not respond or a technical issue occur which renders the comments unintelligible, I will move on to the next speaker. Mayor, members of council, and members of the delegation, are there any questions about this process?
his attention, but I'll text her here.
Okay. Okay, at this point, I would like to open the discussion and welcome, the delegates. And could we identify which members of the delegation we have present?
Yes, Mayor. We have Senator DeSteph, Delegate Askew, Delegate Davis, Delegate Converse Fowler. And that's all.
Okay, and at this point, we'd like to open up the conversation and perhaps ask the delegates, about what we might be able to expect, with the upcoming August session that's, coming, if we can, perhaps get each of them to respond and to let us know if we as a council could help at all, and then we'll open up for a back and forth conversation between us and the delegation.
Senator DeSteph has raised his hand. Senator DeSteph, if you would begin your comments.
I just want to make sure you can hear me. I hear some background noise.
Yes, Senator DeSteph, we could hear you. Would you like to make comments?
With our mayors across the state to reestablish law and order and good order and discipline amongst our areas. The Black Mayors Conference came out yesterday and basically stated that it's not time to defund the police, it's time to refund the police. In other words, we need to put more money into our police and hire more police to help bring back civility to our cities, counties, and towns. If you've noticed, a lot of the statues and Confederate statues have come down, but the protests and the rioting has increased. So I don't think there's a correlation between the two, as many thought and pretty much stated there would be. I think we need to work closely with our mayors to truly reopen the city, reopen the state, and reestablish good order and discipline. And that comes from holding all of our citizens accountable for their actions and not ignoring actions of citizens. Our First Amendment rights are about peaceful protest. Once that goes beyond peaceful, once it turns to violence, it's no longer your First Amendment right. Now you're breaking the law. And we've got to reestablish and take control of our city and of our state. That's the comments I have. Thank you.
Mayor, the next individual who'd like to make comments is Delegate Converse Fowler.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Delegate Fowler, yes, we can hear you. Please begin your comments.
Okay, so sorry about that. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak and to be able to hear from City Council. We appreciate it. I think one of our top priority is public safety. And when you look at public safety right now, the biggest issue we have is COVID-19. And I think that is going to be our priority. We need to be able to work together to be able to hear what the needs of the city are. So I do appreciate this opportunity, and I hope it's an ongoing conversation. I know that police reform is also one of our main issues that we'll be dealing with, but we will be having listening sessions to be able to understand what the public needs, and that way we don't come up with our own conclusions. We are able to take that directly from the public and, again, the stakeholders. So, again, I think we're in a time right now where COVID-19 is the main issue, and we're worried about our safety. And as things are progressing today, I know there's been some announcements of things that are going to change here in our area. And I think we're going to be huge advocates in Richmond to make sure that we have what we need here in Virginia Beach. So again, thank you, and just let us know what you need from us.
Right here. Mayor, there are no additional virtual hands raised at the moment.
Okay, at this point, we can open it up. Any council member have any questions or concerns they would like to express to our delegation? Yep, Mr. Moss.
I'll go first. I just hope as, not for action, but as we collect all the lessons learned from the experience that we have, that the General Assembly at the appropriate time next fall would establish some parameters and checks and balances on the unilateral action on the part of the governor to act, that there ought to be some kind of formalized consultation with the General Assembly, and there ought to be some period of time, just like we have with our own city manager, at some point in time, the General Assembly should have to ratify the actions that take place. I think that's a missing piece of all of this, but this is not the time, but when this is all done, the lessons learned, we've got to go back and look at that and have a sense of check and balance. We shouldn't be governing by executive decree for as long as we have been, in my personal opinion, but that's just, I think that we get better results, and I think we might get some better solutions if there was more collaboration at some point in that process.
Okay, any comment from any of the delegation to Mr. Moss's response, statement?
Senator Staff, if you would like to begin your comments, wait 3 seconds, please.
All right, I'm trying to unmute now. Can you hear me? Okay, great. One of the bills that the Senate working group that I'm assigned to has been working on is limiting to the governor's emergency powers to no more than 14 days, also ensuring that his emergency powers do not trump our Constitution of Virginia. And a lot of the emergency actions that our governor has taken has trumped the Constitution of Virginia on multiple cases. We have sent in numerous letters explaining that the emergency powers do not trump the Constitution of Virginia, and then specifically allowing him the opportunity to roll it back before going public on all of it. So, John, just like you were saying, I believe the governor's executive powers have gone far outweighed what the Constitution of Virginia has ever thought possible. We've never had an emergency declaration last this long. We've never had emergency executive powers trump our Constitution the way that has been attempted recently. And we've never had emergency powers from the governor or any governor last this long. The General Assembly should have been brought in after 30 days to resolve these issues, go back through the budget, and really reinstate and redirect and guide the state. Instead, it's been done by gubernatorial overreach and executive decree.
Mr. Rouse.
Mr. Mayor, I would just move to say, first of all, thank you for all the delegates for the work that you do, and looking forward you going back into the special session. But I don't think it's appropriate that we sit here and litigate the powers or the extent of the powers of the governor. I think it's appropriate that we keep the focus on how we move Virginia Beach forward and the things that we need here in this community locally. The checks and balances, we leave that for the courts to decide, but we should remain and keep the focus on Virginia Beach. Thank you.
Okay, yep, Mr. Moss.
That was directed at me. My concern is those actions have had a direct economic impact and consequences on our revenue, and we should always be concerned about the constitutional exercise of power. That's our oath of office. But if I could extend to another topic, I would hope, and this is directly related to us, when they deal with this qualified immunity issue in the General Assembly, I just hope that we don't act before we really have good analysis across the country as to places that have done away with it and places that haven't, and that we truly understand, or the General Assembly truly understands, the secondary and tertiary impacts of making that change, and if we do make a change, we go into it with our eyes wide open as to the impact on our own police force. Also, does it deliver the benefits to the community that is professed, but I have not yet seen the facts to show that it achieves those results. So that's just the insight that I think affects our individual police department and how we recruit, and also whether or not it would enhance public safety.
Thank you. Any response from the delegation to Mr. Moss's comments?
Delegate Converse Flowers has her hand raised again. Delegate Fowler, if you'd like to begin your comments.
Thank you so much. I appreciate Councilman Rouse, your comments. I just would like to know, what, is there going to be a legislative agenda that you all have for us, that you all will vote on, what you would want? I wasn't sure if we're going to keep going with specific ideas from each council member, or if we're going to have an overall legislative package, and that might come at a later date. But I was hoping for some guidance. We will need the input of the city when it comes down to it on what you need to keep people safe.
Okay. At this point, this is just a, conversation. We realize that this is a special session, and I think it's the intent of council and the hope of council that going forward, that we have better articulation going forward, especially before you go into the main session of 2021. But once again, this is the opportunity just to have an interchange between us, going forward. So, just to improve those levels of communication. Mrs. Wilson. Okay.
I really want to thank you for joining us today. I know all of y'all are busy. I see that Senator DeSteph is especially busy. But thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I just had a couple of more financial questions. I understand that there's going to be another $600 and some million that's going to be allocated from the CARES Act, and if we had any idea of how much of that was going to be for Virginia Beach, and if we knew the restrictions on that money. And then also, I understand that the revenues were not quite as draconian as we thought they might be, or you're anticipating they're not going to be quite as bad. If you have any ideas of what's going to be reinstated into the budget. Thank you.
Okay. Any delegation members can respond, please, to Ms. Wilson?
Delegate Fowler?
Okay, sorry, I was still on mute. I don't have all the answers, but I can say that the reforecast, I believe, is looking not as bad as it could have been. So that's good. I know there's probably some more detailed information coming out, but we are going to get that as soon as we can, and we will of course keep prioritizing where we need to. I'm not sure, but I know Delegate Hayes is on. He might have some better information on that.
If you'd like to make comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Delegate Converse Fowler, and certainly as a member of the Money Committee, one of the Money Committees, the House Appropriations, we've been briefed that going into this terrible pandemic, as we closed out the session, we were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 billion shortfall, but since have had the opportunity to get a better feel for what those revenues look like. And so the revenues coming in now have been projected to be in the neighborhood of $296 million as opposed to the 1.2 billion. And so 296 million isn't anything to sneeze at, but certainly in a better posture than we originally thought that we would be as we came out of session. And so that's what the latest update has been in regards to the revenues that we were looking at.
Anybody else?
No, sir, not from the delegation side.
Okay, Ms. Henley?
Delegate Fowler, I believe, indicated in her initial comments that the top issue, as she sees it, is safety in this COVID situation that we're in, and I couldn't agree more that particularly with the trends that we have seen for the last 2 weeks, and that this particular region is the hot spot for the state, and things don't look good. Can you give us some ideas of what you think the city council could do to support the actions that perhaps need to be taken, or what needs to be done to try to get this virus under control so that we can get back to some semblance of normal, because it doesn't look good at this point. And if there are things that we could do to help, I certainly would want us to be able to take those actions. And if there are things that we can do to cooperate with the state delegation, if you have some suggestions for us, it would be awfully good if we could hear those.
Delegate Fowler?
Thank you, Councilmember Henley. I think that one of the biggest issues is in getting this under control that we'll deal with is budget when we get to session. But I think what we can do and what we can work together at doing is we need to set an example. We need to, show people what we're doing. We need to be able to show that we're doing our part to prevent the spread. We are a hotspot, and I believe we've had some of our the restrictions rolled back in Hampton Roads. So I think right now it's really important to put the political part aside and just show people that we are doing our part. They need to do their part, and that way we can get back to normal. So I think the safety issue is going to be dealt with more on the budget side and more how we deal with our economic recovery after this. But for now, we definitely need to set a good example and stop spreading this virus.
Other member of the delegation?
No, sir.
Okay, Mr. Mathias, I hate to put you on the spot.
I apologize. Delegate Askew has raised his hand.
Okay, we'll get Delegate Askew. Okay.
Sabrina's raised.
Sabrina, okay.
Delegate Askew, if you'd like to go ahead and make comments.
Yes, good afternoon, members of the council, members of the House delegation. Just to piggyback off of what Delegate Fowler said, the governor at 2 p.m. at his 2 p.m. news conference just implemented and rolled back some restrictions. So please feel free to share those and take a look. I think he reduced capacity, some restaurants, and just some other implementations. So take a look at that, and I'll be sharing it. Just feel free to share that far and wide.
Okay. All right, Ms. Wooten? And then if I can, we'll get Mr. Mathias.
Yes, good afternoon. Since we are talking about the budget, I know this issue may not be pertinent to the special session coming up. However, I do want to focus on funding for education. Some of the statistics that I've seen since 2010 shows that, our teachers are not being paid at the rate that they should. Their salary is about 8%, has decreased about 8% since 2014 as it's relative to the state average. And we know that since even before the pandemic, our teachers, administration, they work very hard to take care of our kids. And we just want to be sure that we are addressing the shortfall in funding that normally happens with our teachers' salaries. Shortly, school will be starting, and though it will be virtually, teachers will still be on the front lines as they have been, supporting our students and families and teaching our students. And we just want to make sure that we're doing and we're making every effort to assist them and support them where they need it. And from what my understanding, it is funding for teachers. There's, of course, as you know, a shortage of teachers in our school system, and we're not able to attract the best and brightest if we're not able to pay teachers that salary, competitive salary that they're worth and what's needed. So I just want to make sure we keep that in the forefront, and if there's anything we can do to support on that matter, certainly happy to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any response from the delegation?
Delegate Askew?
Well, that was actually, my hand was still raised, but Councilwoman Wooten, I appreciate your response and your question. We've been working over the past few years to increase teacher pay. We won't forget that. Teachers and other staff were eligible before for a 2% raise, both this summer and next. So we're going to continue that fight. So I appreciate your comment.
Okay, Mr. Wood and then Mr. Rouse.
And I just wanted to just make a comment specific to the actual logistics here. Delegate Davis has texted me saying he cannot get through, and he has comments. I know Ms. Barnes said he logged off, but he wanted to make a comment as well and has been unable to do so.
As soon as he logs back in and I see him, we'll recognize him. Vice
Okay,
Mayor Wood.
Mr. Rouse.
My comments are focused mainly towards our flooding issue here and for the House and Senate delegates here. I would like to know, being that there will be a significant shortfall because of the pandemic, here in Virginia Beach, we are a coastal city, and we are finding ways to mitigate our flooding concerns. Will there be a focus on trying to help us find other sources of revenue coming from the state to help mitigate those concerns?
Delegate Converse Fowler has her hand raised.
Thank you. Appreciate the question. Just wanted to address Councilman Wooten's point with education, and it does come into play with the special session as well. Just considering there will be budget shortfalls and budget issues, especially with dealing with mitigating the pandemic and with teachers returning to work, kids, how we get them back in school, how we deal with that will all fall back into the budget. So those are things that will stay in our minds. But when it comes to flood mitigation, the one thing I can say is we haven't had a lot of conversations about how that relates to housing and COVID-19 and the budget, but the Joint Subcommittee on Coastal Flooding, we will be taking up these topics. And, I think there are revenue sources, and there will be Delegate Askew and I were speaking about this recently, where there will be a renewed push for funding, especially on the local and state level, to bring it down to the local level. So that is something that is in the works, and we will keep you informed on our efforts. And of course, the Joint Subcommittee, all that information will be out there, and we'll be able to push that to the public as well. So it is something that is being considered.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Delegate Fowler, for that, for your response as well. I would really hope you and Delegate Askew keep this as a focus, being that we are, in the midst of hurricane season at the very beginning, and already we have named storms, and so I would really hope the House really take this, really make this a point of focus, and help us have resources towards mitigating these flooding concerns. Thank you.
Anybody else at this point?
Mayor, I'm sorry, Senator DeSteph would like to be recognized. Senator
Okay.
DeSteph.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Can you hear me? Great. When it comes to coastal flooding, I don't believe we're going to discuss that at the special session. It's not part of the agenda. But as we know, there are federal and state programs that allow for additional funds for coastal flooding. We are going to continue to push for that. We've done so for the last 7 years since I've been up there. But it's leveraging both federal and state, as well as working with the localities to come up with money. And Virginia Beach has done a great job with that. Back to Councilwoman Wooten's question on teachers' raises and stuff. I believe it was 2 years ago we did a 5% raise for our teachers, and it was up to the localities to determine how they wanted to do it. I believe Virginia Beach did 3% one year and 2% the next. That'll come up again in January. That will be part of what we focus on. We also have some issues that will come up this special session on education of our special needs children, those who really can't learn from distance learning, those who can't learn from video. We're going to have to try to focus on how do we continue their education and ensure that population is educated, because they're not a portion of the population that learns via Zoom. They need more hands-on, direct, smaller groups, smaller pieces, and one-on-one education for them specifically. Similar to our children with ADHD and attention deficit disorder. They don't learn well via Zoom. They do better in a classroom where there's direct interaction with a teacher. So those are some of the things we'll be focusing on. Thank you.
No other member of the delegation has their virtual hand raised at the moment.
Any other council member? Mr. Mathias? I hate to put you on the spot, but can you give us an update about what the governor said, and can you also inform, the council and public about our response to the governor's letter and, what we have been, trying to, to do to, truly address and show a leadership role with the COVID?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I think we were leading the Commonwealth in our response with y'all's leadership. We had the ambassador program. We worked very hard. Ron Williams and the rest of the staff worked very hard to create that program, and I think it was very successful. Unfortunately, people do what people do, and you can't control them. So we have had a very upward tick of cases down here. The governor has responded after Ms. Burks, Dr. Burks from the federal authorities recommended he do so. And so there's no alcohol sales after 10 o'clock. Restaurants close at 10. Indoor dining at 50% of capacity, even breweries and distilleries, and public and private gatherings no more than 50 persons. So that's sort of rolling back to phase 2 as we had them several months ago. We don't know how long that's going to last, obviously, until the cases drop off again. These things work very well if we can just get more people to wear them and use them and do social distancing. There was also a comment about the budget. The General Assembly does have 2 rainy day funds. The regular rainy day fund that's under the Constitution has, I think, $1.5 billion, $2 billion in it. And then there was another rainy day fund that Delegate Chris Jones, formerly chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, set up a couple years ago. And that has, I want to say, $500 or $600 million in it. So there's money out there to fill the holes caused by COVID. As we reported to council over the weekend, the retail sales have done quite well. Internet sales have done well. Our vacancies here, our occupancy at hotels is running at 75%. Mr. Williams said earlier today that we're doing better than our 20 peer competitors. So we're doing quite well here in Virginia Beach. Good news is we're doing well. That means we're getting more people here. We're probably having more cases. So the governor's rollback may affect tourism more than we've already had effects on it. We also provided at your places a very large amount of information about the various committees that met last week or so. They're going to be meeting regularly. There's another joint meeting tomorrow of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I believe. And so we'll keep you informed on those, but they've got a lot on their plate between the COVID-19 issues to the budget, where they deallocated $2.1 billion, and also the issues of criminal justice reform. Again, there's quite a bit of detail at your places about the information or the issues they've been discussing. Like chokeholds and things like that. Y'all are very aware our police force banned those a number of years ago, so we've been leading the crowd as usual on those.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Wood?
Just a comment. You said restaurants close at 10. It said midnight.
I'm sorry. They stopped selling alcohol at 10. Restaurants closed at 12. I'm sorry if I misspoke.
Right. Ms. Henley?
Bob and the delegation, and I hesitate a little bit to bring up this because we haven't as a body discussed this yet, but this is just my thinking. When we adopted our budget, we put on hold new projects, and one of those, of course, was the continuation of our replacement for Building 2, and until we could find out largely, I guess, whether there was going to be the participation that we had expected from the state. I don't know about everybody else, but I really see quite a difference in our staff's ability to work being dispersed hither and yon as they are, and getting everybody back on this campus, I think should be a major thrust for all of us. So I was wondering if there's any comment yet about whether the money that was in the budget originally for Virginia Beach to go forward with that project would be available, and if we would be able to get started back on that work.
I don't think there's been anything specific based on the outcome of this conversation today, though. The mayor will be sending a letter to the delegation asking for funding to be restored for K-12. That's obviously a priority for the majority of y'all. And also the $10 million be restored so we can start the renovations of Building 2 and then work into the other buildings in due course. It's been very difficult, as council is well aware. We were in 40-some different locations at one time. I think we're down to half that now. But it's creating a real hardship for not only the workers, but for the public. Whereas I told folks back during the General Assembly session, before you could go into Building 2, get a building permit, get your sewer and water done, check on your zoning, all that stuff. Now you might have to go to 5 or 6 different locations throughout the city. So that's a hardship for businesses, for citizens, and again, for the employees. So we're going to try to make that as much of a priority as we can. I personally feel that the General Assembly is going to be in much better shape, obviously, than they were going to be several months ago. I think the end of the year revenues, the Joint Money Committee meeting later this month or next month, and then when the governor comes out with his budget and the new projections in December won't be rosy, but they'll be doing fairly well, all things considered.
Well, I appreciate those comments, but from just my own observation, it's much more difficult to keep track of what's going on, and I'm not sure that everybody who is not with us appreciates how difficult that is. But even just thinking about the flooding issue, which is so much a part of what we are concerned about, just having everybody dispersed with their information and their not ability to work together is creating a lot of problems. It's not just a matter of convenience, but I think our ability to get things done, and I hope the delegation, and I feel certain Senator DeSteph probably can appreciate it having been on the council, we really need to get back. And it's going to take a while anyway, at best, so we don't want to delay anymore if we could help it.
There is some good news, I think, on the federal level. The 3x3x3 study, I feel very confident it will be included in the next budget. The Corps basically is working in their work plan. I feel 99% sure that will be funded, and we'll get a new start on that. So that'll basically, once we get that study done, which we hope they'll just take the Dewberry study and adopt it as a federal study, that'll get us in line for federal participation on the various flooding projects, flood and sea level rise that are such a handicap and an issue, and a challenge for the council.
Okay. And if I can, 1 second, John, if I could just close out, do you have a question for Mr. Mathias?
I do.
Oh, okay, go right ahead
I want
then.
to know what's the effective date? I know you have the announcements usually. Is it effective tomorrow, effective midnight tonight, the rollback?
I suspect it's effective almost immediately, sir.
My question was.
On Friday? Okay, it's on Friday. I got a text message. So.
Midnight, Thursday night, Friday morning.
Okay, gives us time then for rec centers, libraries, and all those things. That's what I was interested in, that question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And, Mr. Mathias, we did send a detailed response back to the governor, was not only a letter with some recommendations, but also documenting, a series of things we were going to do. We also did a collaborative, media piece with the other mayors in the area, and we did put together a PSA that has gone out, I believe, today, calling for accountability and, diligence, personal responsibility with masks and social distancing and things of that nature. So we have been moving. Yes.
I would like to have that briefing because I don't know about all of this except what I've read in the newspaper since it was just kind of put together by staff and so forth. So I would really like to know.
We were under a time crunch with this.
No, I asked if we discussed it
We
last
can do
month,
that.
Tuesday, and we didn't.
Okay.
So I would really like to know what this response was and what we're doing, because I feel sort of like, I don't know, and I would like to know.
Okay, will do. Okay.
One final comment in answer to Delegate Corvus Fowler's query about the legislative package. We have received all the input from the various departments as of Friday. As of today, there's only 3 new issues to put in the package. We were so successful with your package last year due to the help of the delegation. We have only a few carryover issues, so we're going to have a very compact package this year. Although I'm sure council may want to issue or add issues going up to December or the first part of January as issues come before us.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other, I understand Delegate Davis has joined us.
Yes, Delegate Davis, if you would pause.
Thanks, Bob.
Yes, sir.
If you would pause 2 to 3 seconds before beginning your comments. It appears she does.
If there would be any sort of initiative, special session.
Davis, if you would allow us to control your mute button, that will help. Go ahead with your comments. Delegate Davis? I'm sorry, it's not working for,
Okay, it's
I'm
not
not sure
working.
what the problem is. Delegate Converse Fowler?
Thank you. I was just wondering more specifically if there would be any legislative agenda items for the special session, or if the council would be discussing any of those before special session and getting us any feedback, or if, if not.
Does anybody have any special requests outside of what was discussed already?
Question.
Mr. Moss?
Would it make sense for us, rather than just a letter, that next Tuesday we adopt a resolution with regards to Building 2 and the K through 12 education? So it's council as a body sending the message rather than just a letter. That might be, I don't think we have a lot of issues, but if we're going to write a letter, we might as well have a resolution
Okay.
as well.
I would concur.
There's an add-on today.
Okay. We can probably do it next Tuesday. That way we can get it, crafted properly. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else have any comments, whether it be from the council or the delegation?
Can we try Delegate Davis one
We
additional
sure
time?
can.
Delegate Davis, if you would pause 2 to 3 seconds before beginning your comments, and we have unmuted your microphone.
Possible, we're going to try to meet more frequently as a body with the school board, but if we could also include the delegation as we did a number of times ago, and, maybe before the January session, it may be our best interest just to get on the same page because, as I said, we have some challenges. We all three bodies between the delegation in Richmond, city council, and school board, are going to have some concerns and priorities, and if we are articulating and communicating, I think it just might be helpful. But once again, thank you all yes,
I'm sorry, Senator DeSteph would like to make one additional comment, please.
sure.
Senator DeSteph, you go ahead and make with your comment.
Thank you, Amanda. Can you hear me? Whoops, can you hear me, Amanda?
Yes.
I did want to thank you and the council for actually doing this. I think it's fantastic that you've been able to pull everybody together and make this happen. It really is beneficial, I believe, for all. So thank you again for doing that. That's it.
Okay, at this point, Madam Clerk, I thank you for, arranging the logistics, and let me put it this way, we live in challenging times, and, sometimes the virtual way of doing things, as we have found over the months, has been challenging, but I think this was a step in the right direction, and I look forward to the time when we can all convene together. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Donahue, I think we're going to move on to the briefings.
All right, Mr. Mayor, first up is going to be Director Kelly. She's going to give an update on the city's financials.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wood, City Council members. I'd like to give you a preliminary review of our FY 2020 results. As we have said in the past, our revenues still come in until August 14th, so this is still a preliminary review of our FY 20 results. And expenditures also are not finalized until our audit is finalized. So we still are in July receiving June invoices, but we would like to provide you some estimates of where we are and how we stand on certain revenues and expenditures. This is an overall picture of our general fund revenue and expenditure. We have right now, or as of July 20th, last week, when we prepared this report for council, we were at 95.4% of all total revenues. And that would be including that we will receive our PPTRA from the state. As of today, we received $19.6 million more in the past couple of days, so we're at 97% of our revenues. For our expenditures, we've spent 94.9% and have a total variance of 65 to the positive in our expenditures. In FY 2020, we have revenues that have exceeded our budget is our business license, our sales tax, and our use of money. Revenues that are under budget are restaurant meal tax, hotel tax, and charges for services. And revenues yet to be finalized are our real estate and personal property. For FY 20 general fund revenue, we have this pie chart where it shows that the real estate taxes are a big preponderance of our revenues that come in, and we're at 45% of those revenues as a percentage of the whole. Our real estate tax revenue, the general fund portion only, which is about 92 to 93% of our real estate, goes to the general fund, and we are at 97.7%. This graph was done last week, and it was 96.7%. So we still have a little bit more to collect, and as we had mentioned before, August 4th is the penalty and interest phase, and that had moved back from June, and so we're still anticipating some revenue to come in, more so than in the previous. Personal property tax is probably our hardest tax to predict because it does come in so late in the year, but we did receive $13 million more since this chart was done, so it was $103 million, or about 95% have been received. General sales tax is at 101%. As we said, that was one of the revenues that came in a little bit higher. We had a very successful first part of the FY 2020 year, so that really helped carry forward and make it higher than budget. Restaurant meal tax is, this is the total, so as you know, our restaurant meal tax goes to general fund as well as tip and our TAP fund and our open space fund. We're at 94% of our actual budget of 64.4%. And we were down about $4 million in that. Our hotel room tax is at 86.1% of our budget, and it was down about 8% from the same period prior year. The general fund, or we're under budget about $5.2 million. However, I think somebody mentioned that in July, our occupancy rate is about 73.4% of last year. April, May, and June, April was at 27.8%, May was at 38.1% compared to last year, and June was at 64.6%. And so that was compared to last year, it was a 21% decrease in June, and about 14% decrease in July for hotel tax. Our general fund expenditures, we have a projected salary savings of about $20.4 million. The preponderance of our expenditures go to personnel, school support, and then operating, and our debt service is about 4.2% of our total budget. We have gone over this chart a few months ago, our economic impacts for COVID-19, revenues and real estate property. While they're due June 5th, we suspended the penalty and interest to August 4th, so we're still waiting to see the impacts of moving that back. Public utilities suspended the disconnecting of water services. Trustee taxes are 1 month lag, and then meal tax, we suspended May and June taxes. Our expenditures, we had a hiring freeze, and we still continue that hiring freeze. We eliminate non-essential purchases, non-essential travel and training, and then obviously we had to implement some of our public health programs for the federal programs that came down. And so in summary, our cash balances for all funds are at an appropriate level. Some of our expenditure savings are being offset with additional COVID-19 expenditures, but of course we have the CARES funding that's covering some of those. And then we still have the $46.9 million for the personal property tax relief to come in. And then we will estimate about $25 to $35 million coming in between July and August 15th for personal and real estate. And we've already gotten $13 million of that. Our next steps is in August, we will provide another update. Until the audit is done, we can't do a final version of the FY20, but we should have very firm revenue numbers and much more succinct and reliable expenditure numbers. Then for the FY21 update, we will have one for July, one for August, and one for September. And then we should have the audit done by the end of October. I don't want to give a specific date for the audit. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Thanks. Can you flip back to slide 3, please? So when I'm looking at the revenues that are under budget, I have 3 questions, if you'll indulge me, Mr. Mayor. First, charges for services. Describe what that is for me, please.
Charges for services are, and I have those written down. Charges for services are things like library fines, charges for convention center, the STOP program, the aquarium.
So basically things that are closed.
I'm sorry?
Things that
are closed.
Okay.
Yes.
With respect to the restaurant meal tax being down $2.8 million, how much of that do you think is based on suspension of the meals tax versus just the overall? I mean, do we have an idea of that?
It's really hard to tell. We did reduce our budget, and so it's hard to tell, the 3.4 million we reduced our budget by. So the 2.8 is based on that 3.4 plus the 2.8. So that was the under budget, the revised budget that we had.
So it's 3.4 plus 2.8.
Right.
So that's how much we're really down.
Right.
So 6-ish. Okay. And then the hotel tax, is there a calculus where we can figure out how many room nights that represents, that loss?
Yes, and this is just the general fund revenues, the 1 million for the general fund, and obviously there's a little bit more for the other funds. The city of Virginia Beach has about 10,000 rooms that can be occupied, and I would have to get Convention and Visitors Bureau to really come up with an actual number, but they did tell me that there was
$1 a room night. Trying to remember what that was. Actually, you have it right here. The tip.
Let me go back to it.
5%.
So in April, it was 27.8% of the rooms were occupied, so about 2,700 rooms were occupied. And so in May, it was 38, June was 64, and in July, it's 73%.
And do we know what that is comparatively?
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
Where are we normally this
So
year?
in July, typically, in July last year, it was 14% higher. So we're down 14% from last year. April was our worst. It was 60% lower than the previous year. May was 47% lower, and June was 21% lower.
Thanks.
Okay, anybody? Okay, Ms. Henley and then Mr. Moss.
Have we established the standards that we expect to have met before we revisit expenditures, such as some of the things that we deferred, or perhaps the hiring freeze? what do we expect are the levels that we need to see before we can reach that point of revisiting?
That's
What
like
do we
looking
know?
into a crystal ball. And as we do this pandemic, it's whether it's a V shape, a U shape, I think it's going to take longer, and it's going to be much more drawn out before we really see the full impact of this. And so in the beginning, in March, we thought we were going to have much more dramatic decreases in our revenue, just like the state did. We were very conservative. I think we're seeing some less dramatic impacts on our revenues, but that doesn't mean that it won't linger a lot longer than we expect it to. So I can't answer that right now.
Okay, Mr. Moss.
I know you won't have this answer, but hopefully the regional planning place that has a lot more economists on staff than we do. But how much of the impact that we didn't see that we forecasted is due to the $600 a week and the $2,400 to a household and $500 per child under 16 and under? Because I think those things are stimulus that mask the underlying weaknesses of the economy. So if we don't understand to what extent our revenue flows are propped up by those expenditures, we don't have a good idea of the foundation. So I concur that we really don't know what the future looks like.
Sure.
And, because if you looked at, I'd be interested to see in the end personal property tax, how many people don't pay it or wait and pay it later with the penalty. But I also like to see how we did with it's not in the general fund, but what was a town center TIF collection of real estate taxes owed plus what's collected in light of the articles that's been in the paper about their situation there? I'd be interested to see if they paid on time and just how did they collect and what that means to the solvency of the TIF, because that's another part of the budget we wouldn't see here. But I'm glad Councilman Wood asked the questions I was going to ask about the meal tax, and then Mrs. Henley getting back. When do we know when we can say where we're at? And I assume that the use of extra money on use of money was because we spent less, so our balances were higher, or did we get higher yield on the money that we had invested?
I think a little bit of both. I think we had a little bit more cash than we had anticipated, as well as I think the treasurer was being a little bit more aggressive this year in investing in the beginning of the year especially. So it was a little bit of that, both.
So the trustee taxes for May and June have been recorded?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. So these are they're final unaudited.
Right.
That.
So
So
we
there
get
might
to
be
the
some
point
adjustments.
that
But
Councilman Wood was asking about restaurants and meal tax. The meal tax, we ought to be able to get better insight.
Sure.
To what extent did the gross sales that we saw in the past, what were they down versus revenue collection? And that might give us some insight as to what impact did it have any? But that would be one way of looking at that, is to look how gross sales went relative to the taxes we collected versus gross sales and the taxes were in place. Might give us some insight as to what beneficial impact that had. And, but I do think, as I mentioned, if Congress goes into recess and we have a delayed whatever phase 3 is, and there likely may not be any local and state government relief in phase 3, that looks like that's outside the parameter. I think those are the kind of things I think we have to know. I guess we had set October, I think, Mr. Mayor, I think is when we were going to take a refresh look at where we were. We should probably know all of those things, but no one's anticipating a federal budget in a presidential election year till after the election, and probably not till January, so there's still going to be some further uncertainty on the federal front. So it may well be we're in January, possibly before we look at any budgetary reset. But anyway, thank you for your report. I always enjoy reading it.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
I saw a listing yesterday, I think it was, of the trustee taxes that have not been collected, and but they're apparently, by virtue of the fact that they have not been collected, are you getting reports on how much those uncollected amounts are?
Yes, we're working on that. So we're working on getting all of the reports for meals and restaurants and hotels and cigarettes to see where we really are in terms of what was actually reported as received by the business versus what the city collected.
So you know how much they still have to pay?
Yes.
Even
Yes. I just
though-
didn't have that.
Even though they haven't paid them?
Right. And we will have that back for you in August and provide you that report.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Let me ask.
Okay, Ms. Wooten.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly, for the update. And I just want to talk about personal property deadline or that extension. I think we gave a delayed date of, is it August 15th?
Well, the personal property was due in June 4th or 5th, but we extended the penalty and interest till August 4th.
So my question, well, not really question, but I would like to see if it's possible, if we can consider extending that time frame as citizens are grappling and still working through the pandemic. People are still, trying, if they're not employed, their employment may be a bit difficult at this point. So I want to see if we can consider extending that time frame. And constituents have called and approached me about that because it would be beneficial and helpful. So I just want to know if we could consider that on their behalf. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, Alice.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Donahue.
At this time, Taylor Adams will join us to talk about a sale of excess city property.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Vice Mayor and Council. Quickly, thank you, sir. Before I dive into this, Councilmember Moss, to your point on the $600 assistance directly, would just offer something interesting that we're seeing in the data here locally from the Employment Commission is where we were on a 7-week downtrend in new claims, new filings for unemployment. In the last 3 weeks, we've seen that number turn the other way and start to go up. This last Friday, we ended with just over 2,000 cases, which is now over 3 weeks become a trend that we're very concerned about. And so I just would tell you that your point on the impact of the $600 per week in additional assistance is very real in our local economy right now as it relates to consumer spending. Moving to this actual item, this is a potential request for the declaration of excess for a piece of property at sort of Potters Road and Fairlady Road. It's near the London Bridge Commerce Center. This has come by way of an unsolicited proposal. I'll cover the disclosures that we have on this quickly and then provide a bit of history on this case. Here are the terms of the unsolicited proposal that we received from June 12th. The developer, of course, is Michael Siphon. You can see the parcels here, and you can see a potential layout that he's given us. His proposed use is for a performance collision center. There is a rezoning that is contemplated with this, and I'll add a little context on that in just a moment. He has offered us $855,000. He contemplates a total potential investment of just over $4.6 million, and you can see that broken down there. There are 18 jobs in this request at an average salary of $78,000 per. To add a little additional context to this deal, this property, the 3 parcels you see here, are currently assessed for just over $600,000, and we purchased this piece of property years ago for just over $900,000. So we are, and this was purchased as part of our APZ program. Basically, and we just remind the public, of course, council knows this, that there's a long-standing precedent where our intent for acquisition of property here is not to make a profit, but it's to promote a conforming use as approved by our partners, the Navy. Yes.
Do we have to give half of that money to the state?
Yes, ma'am, we do, but it's important to note in most cases, they carried half the bill on the front end
No,
as
I
well.
know that.
Yes, ma'am.
But-
Just for the benefit of the public, yes, ma'am. As we were partners with the state in acquisition under this program, we, half of the proceeds are returned to the state.
But the cost to make, you know, the closing and all of that sort of things, do we share that with the state as well?
Councilmember, I believe we do, but I don't know the specifics of that.
I think
The specific answer, to that I have to look to the city attorney's office.
I likewise believe we do, but would not swear to that with 100% certainty as I sit here.
Thank you.
Other things about this one, and I'll just mention this before I get the question from Mrs. Henley, because I have had it on prior issues like this, whereas we have heard loud and clear that historically we are not to bring requests like this that contemplate a rezoning that this council and certainly prior councils like us to bring the rezoning and the land deal together as a package. The one reason, the one piece of precedent that we can hang our hat on with this one is all the property that I won't say all, but the vast majority of the property that we acquired under this program contemplated that a rezoning would follow. And so, so in looking at this, we are bringing this one forward ahead of the rezoning, but only because part of the reason we acquired this was to promote a rezoning originally. Other things we would mention, there has been an RFP that was conducted for this parcel. Mr. Siphon was the selected proposer then for the public. As you all remember, that process was formally sunset. However, he has come back with a similar proposal. Here's a rendering of the facility. Some Performance Collision Center. We would tell you they are an existing offerer down the street, sort of in the Lynn Haven corridor, but they would be moving here into a new facility. Questions that we have asked: would the residents be seeing sort of wrecked cars as they drove by? And we've heard from the in the parking lot, and we've heard from the developer that no, that's not accurate. And also, I will tell you, just as I anticipated you all would ask me this question, I did a bit of research today on this provider and other facilities that they operate, and from everything that our research suggested, this appears to be a clean operation where the repairs are happening indoors and it is not unsightly. That said, we also other things that we would mention, we know that typically considerably more public input would be conducted prior to us standing in front of you asking this, but what I will tell you is the process that we are on will still allow for a wealth of public input with the community in this area prior to bringing back the final action for you. Also, we just mentioned that there's that the rezoning itself. We are not asking to short circuit any of your rezoning process, so that there'd be a wealth of public input that follows that action as well. With that, I'm happy to take your questions. If it was your desire to move forward, our recommendation would be to schedule a public hearing.
Okay, Mr. Wood.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something that Taylor didn't mention. This was passed unanimously by the Oceana Land Use Conformity Committee. And for those of y'all that aren't aware of what that is, that's a committee that's been set up since all the BRAC stuff. There are 2 citizens on that committee who live in APZ. One, the Navy, the Oceana CO is there, as well as his legal staff, and there's other people on there. But I just wanted to mention that they were briefed on this and they voted in public session to approve it.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Moss.
Couple questions.
Yes,
First of all, you did say that the RFP process that concluded was selected at a different time and has expired, and this is an application which was not subject to an RFP. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Second question, you also mentioned that it was some portion or some level of effort was moving from Lynn Haven Industrial Park. Did I hear you correctly?
So, I think it's the Lynn Haven retail corridor close to the
Retail
mall. Yes.
corridor. So what is the net employment? Is it 18 additional people from the baseline? Is 18 is the baseline and they're hiring 12 before? So what is the net increase in employment as a result of the application?
I do not know the exact answer to that standing here, but I'll get you that information. Yes, sir.
I've got some of that, so if you don't mind.
I don't mind where the answer comes from.
Be happy to take. So the applicant now actually, this company used to be a tenant of the applicant. The applicant actually bought the company and is relocating it because he's got another company with, and I can't remember how many jobs he said that are moving into that space to backfill it, but he said it's a significant number of jobs. And so there are new jobs with this one. I'm not sure the total number, but then there are also backfill jobs because he purchased the business, is expanding it, and is releasing the other space to others.
See, I think all that is important information when we're talking with the public, because we always talk about the things that we're trying to do to drive up higher wage employment, like global technology systems. And there's one thing if you're just changing them from one location to another, which looks like just you're moving them around on the chessboard, versus you're really having an expansion and you're backfilling, so there really is a net gain. So I think in some respects we've understated the project. And I just think it's always important that we get the full picture, and sometimes we forget to do that. There's a lot more gain here. That's why I ask those questions. 'Cause
Yes, sir.
if you're just moving people around, that doesn't really get you a lot. But if it's really net growth and you got a base, then you want to mention that too, because that is what we're all about. Because I can tell you, there aren't many $78,000 jobs in Virginia Beach. You know what the average private sector weekly wage here is, and it's
Yes, sir.
gets you less than $40,000 a year.
Yes, sir.
And you can't live here on that.
That's right.
So I do appreciate it. I just would ask that when you do come back, that you have add in the information that Councilmember Wood had, and I'm sure you had it as well, but to give us a complete picture, I'd appreciate that.
So I will tell you, and so thank you for that, council member, and what the vice mayor said is absolutely right. So as I was standing here, I did not have the developers express permission to mention the backfill project, but what I will tell you is, but yes, part of the sense of urgency associated with this project is that we have a tenant waiting on the existing facility, and we would very much like to cite that, and we're happy to bring that information back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Wilson.
And I can't remember the numbers, but when we did the RFP originally, the price that was offered for the land, this was by far much more than the other.
So,
Correct?
So the offer was near the same, but what I'll tell you is we're getting a considerably better use here.
His offer's the same, but the other people.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Their offers were much lower. Yes, ma'am. He was a great offer.
Selected them originally.
Yes, ma'am.
Was we were gonna get a lot more money for the land, and it just
That's
looked like
right.
a better project.
And
now it's even better than that.
And speaking to the employment side, the first offer relied heavily on sort of what would have been storage, which does not bring a great deal of jobs. We like this project a lot better.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, at this point, does anybody have any problem moving forward?
Mayor, if I may just say one more thing on my way out.
Yep.
You all, just quickly, you had a copy of yesterday's Wall Street Journal at your desk today. You'll notice A5 was a great announcement from us. We've had overwhelming support from the community as it relates to this announcement. One of the kindest comments I got was from Miss Beth Allen, who's a frequent contributor here, who thanked us who said that she liked this ad as well. But it highlights the strength of our local economy. And obviously, the Wall Street Journal is a publication for businesses, and it's about business. And so we thought this was a great way to tell some of the success that your leadership has brought to our community. So thank you.
And I just wanted to.
Going out nationally.
Ma'am,
Bad.
so this was a national ad.
Just, through local or regional advertising.
That's right. So the Wall Street Journal has 4 sectors. We could have taken any one of those, but where normally the national rate is over 4 cents per subscriber, we were able to get basically a significant reduction on that number to do a national ad. And so we thought it was great to talk about the strength of our local economy, particularly how we are positioned, how our form of development uniquely positions us for success as the national economy enters recovery. So, thank you.
Great, and this is a copy of, the article, and yes, Virginia Beach is open for business. So we're okay to move forward on the application, okay? All right, Mr. City Manager, moving on.
And now the planning staff, Director Tahan is going to come and give an update on the pending planning items coming up for the next council meetings and public hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Vice Mayor.
Hey, welcome,
Mayor.
Bobby.
Hello. Myself and Bill Lanford will be going through the pending planning items that will be coming on the August 4th and August 18th City Council agendas. The August 4th meeting, which the council has placed at the Convention Center, has 27 planning items, with the majority of them being short-term rental applications. The first item will be briefed after the pending planning items to allow for any questions, since I do have a large presentation for the pending planning items, and that is for the Westminster of Canterbury. The rest of the items, items 2 through 27, are all conditional use permits for short-term rentals. 20 are recommended for approval by staff and planning commission on the consent agenda. 5 were recommended for approval by staff and planning commission, and 1 was recommended for approval by staff and denial by the planning commission due to insufficient parking. The first item is by You're Not Alone LLC at 207 79th Street, Unit C in the Lynn Haven District. The applicant has a 3-bedroom unit and a duplex dwelling. They are proposing to operate as a short-term rental unit. The planning staff recommended approval with an alternative parking layout, while the planning commission failed to approve the motion on a 4-4 vote.
Is the LLC name correct?
Yes, sir, it is. We double-checked it a few times.
Okay.
The proposal, again, is a 3-bedroom short-term rental unit. They have 2 parking spaces which are located on the private property, and the 3rd parking space, which is located in their driveway, which is the driveway length from there's an existing 3-foot sidewalk that is between the parking spaces 1 and 2 and the 3rd parking space, but between the sidewalk and the edge of pavement is about 27 feet. So this is although it's in the public right-of-way, for all intents and purposes, it is in their driveway.
I have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Moss.
Generally speaking, a tie vote means the status quo is sustained, so isn't that equivalent to denial?
That is
failure
correct.
to approve?
Yes, sir, that is
Okay,
correct.
well, this reads approve failed, which is not the same thing as saying the application was denied.
I will reword that.
Syntax is important.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
This is in the zone in the R5R North End Overlay District, where there are a number of short-term rental that operate in this area. Again, the Planning Commission the motion to approve did fail, which ends up being a denial recommendation. The next item is by Lisa Ure in the Bayside District at 23.
It's actually in the Lynn Haven District.
I'm sorry, sir.
It's okay.
Yes.
That's in the Lynn Haven district.
Yes, sir. At 2312 Red Tide Road, Unit A. Staff recommended approval, and the Planning Commission recommended 8-0 for approval. This is a request for Unit A, which is the front unit, which is a 2-bedroom, a 2-bedroom unit that's part of a 3-unit condominium that was constructed in 1980. They do have 2 existing parking spaces that are on site that will accommodate the proposed requests. The rest of the existing parking area, which you can see here from the boulder moving back towards the right-of-way, is the existing parking for the multifamily use. Next item is by Atlantic Development Associates LLC in the Lynn Haven District at 112A 56th Street. Staff recommends approval, and the Planning Commission voted 8-0 to recommend approval as well. This is a request for a 4-bedroom single-family home. This was constructed in 2019, and all 4 parking spaces are located on the property, with 2 parking spaces located in the garage and the 2 parking spaces located in the existing driveway. Next item is by CEBT Properties LLC in the Lynn Haven District at 201 64th Street. Staff recommends approval, and the Planning Commission, on a vote of 8-0, recommended approval as well. It's an existing single-family home that's with 3 bedrooms built in 1940. There was an additional home built in 2016 that is not a part of this request, which is to the north here. They do propose to have 3 parking spaces, with parking space number 3 proposed to be extended, and is one of the conditions as part of the approval of if the conditional use permit is approved. The 2 parking spaces 1 and 2 already have pavement. Parking space 3 needs additional pavement to meet the parking requirement.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
I know down at the north end, there's unique development. Normally, we don't allow 2 different buildings on the same lot. This, I guess, what is the underlying zoning there? And is the ownership separate? How do you do that when you've got 2 units on the same lot, and now one is going to be have a conditional use permit? I don't understand the whole process, the underlying process.
This property is actually zoned RT4, which is one of our old RT4, which is one of the old resort zoning classifications, which did allow for some semblance of duplex or multifamily. In this case, I believe they are owned separately, and we can have the applicant, I will double check on that information. But if it was, they would be owned as condominium units, with one person owning one unit and the other person owning the other unit. And the condition itself is conditioned to the specific address of this proposed unit. So it only approves the approval, if the conditional use permit is approved, is for only this one shown.
Can I follow up on that question, Ms. Emily?
Yes, please.
So as part of our process then, not just taking people's words, so if that's what they're doing, it's this condominium construct, which is recognized, but do we see all that documentation, and is that legally reviewed so we don't have this subdivide by deed thing, and actually it's a true condominium that's actually been codified and recorded in the court?
So usually what we will do is we will double check the current city records that are on the property so that we can understand if there are multiple property owners. The city itself, we just are a receiver of the information if someone creates a condominium, but we do check. And then also, in this case, since there are only 2 properties here, we do require the signature of both property owners to sign off on the ability to apply for the conditional use permit.
I just want to make sure. So we do check the land book, and we do check the court records, and do physically observe and testify to the fact that they have a condominium legal agreement for the property.
I will. We check the current city real estate records to verify. We don't go in to check the existing condominium documents. We just check to see what the ownership that we have on file with the real estate assessor.
So we don't know. We don't have any independent verification that that's true.
Other than what's provided by the real estate assessor, and if they tell us that. So.
Thank you.
Well, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Ms. Finley.
So then the parking is just somewhere on that lot.
For this one, in this case, it's on the driveway that is only accessible for this property. So, I'm sorry. This is the proposed unit. These are the parking spaces with the driveway. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am.
I still have, y'all know my position on these, but, all right, 3 bedrooms, that means 9 people. If they all happen to be adults, they're not gonna carpool too well. So where would the 4th car park?
So when we review it, we do note that that they are meeting the parking standard that's in the ordinance right now, which is 1 space per bedroom. In this case, I believe there is on-street parking that is available. It's not in one of the restricted parking programs, per my notes here. So potentially they could park on the street if there were additional parking spaces. But we are only checking to assure, one, that they meet the current zoning standard.
Really complicated with enforcement.
Right. Items 6 and 7 are by La Paz, Inc., in the Lynn Haven District at 2565 Shore Drive, Units A and B. Was recommended for approval by staff and recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. This is an existing duplex with 3 bedrooms in each unit. The proposal is to do a short-term rental for both units on the property. 6 parking spaces have been provided, and they have been reviewed by the Department of Public Works to assure that they meet the sightline requirements, because there was discussion about safety considerations from the neighborhood coming out onto Shore Drive and potential impacts here with view to see oncoming vehicles. So this was reviewed by traffic engineering, and this layout for the parking was approved by traffic engineering in the front.
Mr. Wood?
Mr. Stiles, this is the one I'll be abstaining on.
Yes, sir.
Item number 8 is by Ocean Rental Properties LLC in the Beach District at 2216 Baltic Avenue, Unit B. Again, recommended approval by staff, and 8-0 recommended approval by the Planning Commission. This is an existing single-family home that was constructed in 1953. Again, a second home was built, this is similar to the other one, in 2007 here on the north side of the property. The proposal is for the 4-bedroom existing single-family home to become a short-term rental. 4 parking spaces are required and 4 parking spaces are proposed. The property is located in the residential parking permit program area, which limits the ability to park on the street. And there is a condition as such that will not allow, as this is operated as a short-term rental, to allow them to get guest and visitor parking passes so that they don't impact the existing property owners.
Mr. Bellucci?
Mr. Sahan, when it says corner of the deck truncated, is my understanding that part isn't there to accommodate the third parking place?
That is correct. They'll have to make alterations on the property to accommodate the third parking space.
And I'm just trying to look at my geometry here. Is that number 3 just looks a little strange to me. Is that, would it fit if it were the other way, or is it only, you can only park that way if you park kind of crooked like that?
So the applicant had proposed to pull in directly into the parking space, but the ability to maneuver out was not feasible, which is why staff proposed to the applicant to remove a portion of the deck to allow for the maneuvering. If they were to go in, they would be able to back out without running into anything. It would have been difficult to meet the requirement to essentially, without a hammerhead, to back out and then come forward if they were to pull in and put their 2 spaces here.
Customary to go to such lengths to accommodate a parking space in that regard?
As far as if staff doesn't believe that the parking space will work, we do note to the applicant that they need to come up with a solution in order to accommodate the parking space, and that was the solution.
And do you know how a solution like that will be conveyed to the person who's renting the property? In other words, to have a car pulled in at that angle to accommodate the 4 parking, it just seems like that would require some explicit instruction that may or may not be conveyed to the person who's renting it, so it may not even work when it's applied.
Understand, yes, sir. This is the parking plan that is on file with the city if this gets approved in the conditional use permit. So this is the parking
I
plan.
have concerns with plans like this.
Yes, sir.
Get back to enforcement. We don't have any.
Yeah, I think Mr. Moss made the point, this really relies upon enforcement, which we know we're not able to provide at this point.
You know, it's almost, if you were thinking, certainly with all this drone technology, you can certainly passively observe that property or that whole area often and digitize it and document violations, and they violated enough, you cancel their conditional use permit.
And not only, if I could just continue, Mr. Mayor, a parking situation like this that may or may not be conveyed clearly to the person who's renting the unit could just exacerbate the problems that we have with STRs and cause frustration in the neighborhood amongst the neighbors, and for lack of parking or a lack of clarity about how to park, and that just continues to contribute to the perception that these are problematic. So I'm not really, for me, happy with going to these lengths to meet the conditions. Thanks, sir.
Sir. Next item, item number 9, is by William Wright in the Beach District at 909 Pacific Avenue. Staff does recommend approval, as well as the Planning Commission on the 8-0. This is an existing two-bedroom unit in a multifamily building that was constructed in 1969. One parking space is provided on site, with the second space proposed to be leased from the 9th Street Municipal Garage, which is right across 9th Street from the proposed development. Council has seen another item that has come here for units and to do short-term rentals in this existing property previously. Item number 10 is by Carlin Creative Concepts LLC in the Beach District at 901 Pacific Avenue, Unit B. Again, same property, a different property owner. This is again a two-bedroom unit, and they have one parking space dedicated to them, as well as they're proposing to lease a parking space from the 9th Street parking garage.
I have a question.
Yep, Ms. Finley.
These two applications are the same building, looks like it, and I think we've probably seen it before. How many units are in this multifamily building, total units?
I do not know off the top of my head, Ms. Henley, I apologize. I will get that for you.
Yes.
Well, I know, of course, this was, as you said, it was built in 1969, and I'm sure construction standards were very different then. I'll bet you there's no firewalls or anything like that in this building. And I think one of the actions that the General Assembly took a year or so ago in considering short-term rentals is that having it become a short-term rental does not, quote, change the use and allow us to require anything additional. My concern is we're putting an awful lot of people in a building like this that's old construction, and I worry about the fire that's going to come, and people aren't going to get out of a building that they're unfamiliar with. And I really worry when I look at something that was constructed in 1969 and now is being converted into something of this nature without any new standards for something like fire protection. I'm pretty sure your answer is no, we don't require anything.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
We can't.
Correct.
That's a fallacy of this short-term rental stuff, is we can't require what we need to require safety-wise when we're overloading these places with a lot of people. But this is the same, this is the same building for these two different owners. That's one of my worries.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Abbott.
Thank you. Bobby, I have, for some reason, this building looks familiar to me, and I feel like I got an email, probably all of us did, a while back. Is this one of the buildings at the oceanfront that has historically been used as a short-term rental, but not in an official way?
Yes, they do them all the time.
So these are being used primarily as vacation homes. Do we have a way to verify that?
No, ma'am. There is a real estate term that was utilized for them that we're not familiar with. I think I don't know if Ms. Wilson's familiar with the term that was in there, and it's escaping me at the moment. But there was one that doesn't explain what it was. But yes, we've heard the same thing, that historically these have been used as short-term rentals or vacation homes for many years.
So is there any way to verify that they have been, I mean, I assume, well, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. When you have like timeshares, do they pay an occupancy tax or anything like that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any paper trail for us to confirm that, yes, in fact, these units have been rented in week-long increments or 2 weeks, or like the houses in Sandbridge.
Right. It would have been key for them to, prior to July 2018, to have registered in order to be considered grandfather. That would have been that's the easiest way for us to know that someone meets the criteria.
Okay. But there's no way for us to find out whether or not that's valid?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wood and then Ms. Wilson.
We've actually passed a couple of them in this building. And I know in the 1980s, it was a weekly and monthly rental place, because when I worked down there, I went there a lot. And I know that we've done a couple of them, and this is one, as I recall, this one has sufficient parking. There was another one that didn't, but this one has it, and now I think they sold them all as condos. It was one ownership before.
Okay, Ms. Wilson?
I think they're called condo hotels. Is that what you're looking for?
I can't remember the term. We've seen it. There's just nothing that tied together for us to know what that meant.
Yeah, well, it's mostly for financing. It's a condo, but gets rented out on a weekly basis. Kind of Dolphin Run does the same thing. And it's been, like Jim says, historically, they've been using these for short-term rentals. And it's not prohibited in their condo docs, which a lot of buildings don't allow it. There's a lot of buildings that won't allow short-term rentals, but they've been doing this for quite some time. And, and like Jim says, we've already approved several, and one of them had just one parking spot, I believe.
They're one bedrooms, I think, aren't they?
No.
Or they're two bedrooms.
There's a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms in
Yeah,
this.
there's a mixture. Anyway, I hope that helps.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Ms. Henley?
Just one more point that worries me as well. These two-bedroom unit, because of our short-term rental conditions, they're allowed 3 people per bedroom. So that's 6 adults that can be in that unit. If it were a bedroom by standards of other rentals, it would have to meet certain square footage requirements. We don't have any idea how large any of these bedrooms are when we're approving them, do we? We don't.
No, ma'am.
We don't require looking at the size. It's just automatically 3 people per bedroom.
As the ordinance calls, yes, ma'am.
Okay, anybody else?
Next item is Nathan Bowling at 423 21st and a half Street. Again, planning staff recommends approval, with the commission recommending approval as well. There was an alternative compliance approved for this to build 2 duplexes on the property. The request is for one of the units, a 3-bedroom unit, to operate as a short-term rental. 3 parking spaces are required and 3 parking spaces are provided on the property, with 1 in the garage. And the property does line the RPP boundaries, which means on one of the conditions it would not be able to have any visitor or temporary guest parking passes.
Yes, Ms. Abbott?
Who owns the other side of the duplex?
I'll have to look, Ms. Abbott. I'll have to look. There's been a couple that look like this, and one is owned by all of them, and the other one is owned by different owners, so I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head. All right. Next is application by Don Wyatt at 609 Bayway Road. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval. It's an older home built, 2-bedroom, single-family home built in 1951. They are required to have 2 parking spaces, and they have 2 parking spaces in their existing parking area. Number 13 is by New Jerusalem Church at 101 Bishop Thurgood Avenue in the Beach District. Again, recommended approval by both the Staff and Planning Commission. It's a home built in 2004 with 3 bedrooms. 3 parking spaces are required and 3 parking spaces are provided. With any potential overflow, there is on-street parking that is available for any potential overflow. Number 14 is at 1804 Baltic Avenue, Unit E, by Austin and Star Boyles in the Beach District. This is recommended for approval by staff and by the Planning Commission. You've seen the majority, except for one of the townhouses in this row. The request is for one of the 3-bedroom townhouses, the N unit, to operate as a short-term rental. They have 3 parking spaces are required and 3 parking spaces are provided. To note, this property is being listed, but it's listed as a home share at the moment, in case any information comes forward as far as how it's listed. They are renting out a room in the short-term rental, which is permitted by right now. They are looking to do whole home rental, which requires the conditional use permit. Number 15 is by McCleskey and Associates at 409 Southside Road. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval. Existing single-family home built in 1964, 3 bedrooms, 3 parking spaces are required, and 3 parking spaces are provided on site. Next one is also by McCleskey and Associates at 441 Southside Road, just south of the previous application. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval. An existing 3-bedroom home constructed in 1988. 3 parking spaces are required and 3 parking spaces are provided, with one of the parking spaces located underneath the existing deck. Next 2 items are by McCleskey and Associates at 1405 Cypress Avenue, Units A and B. Staff recommended approval, with the Planning Commission recommending approval on a 7-to-1 vote. This is a proposed duplex dwelling that is yet to be constructed. 2 3-bedroom units in each. They do have a site plan approval and building permits to construct the property. However, they have not started construction yet. There are proposed 6 parking spaces, and 6 parking spaces are required, 3 for each unit, and 6 parking spaces are provided.
Can I ask, on that building permit, what does it say the proposed use is?
I will have to see if they said short-term
Single-family
rental.
residence. Doesn't say short-term rental, I'll bet.
No, ma'am, it probably says duplex residence.
But if it said short-term rental, would there be other standards that we could require?
Not that I'm aware of, because of the way the,
That might be something we might want to have in our legislative package.
Number 19 is Jade Vacations LLC at 329 25th Street. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval. You've seen a number of short-term rental applications in this existing complex. This is a 2-bedroom unit, and there are 5 buildings in this condominium development. 2 bedrooms, which means there are 2 parking spaces required and 2 are provided, 1 in the garage and 1 in the driveway on the property. Again, this is located in the RPPP boundaries, which would limit the ability to have guest passes and visitor passes. So the 2 parking spaces would have to be accommodated on site. Item 20 is by Andreas Loizo. I'll try. 4005 Atlantic Avenue, Unit 102. Again, recommended approval by Staff and Planning Commission. You've seen, again, a number of these applications here. This is a 1-bedroom unit within an existing condominium. The unit has 1 dedicated parking space for it across the street on 40th Street. Item 21, at 1047 Coastaway Drive by Prolific Properties LLC, recommended for approval by the Staff and Planning Commission. Existing townhouse, 2-bedroom, which would have 2 parking spaces required and 2 parking spaces are provided on site. On-street parking is permitted, and there is an opportunity for any potential overflow parking to be handled on the street. Item 22 is by John Keenan at 410 Terrace Avenue. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval. It's an existing 4-bedroom, single-family home that was constructed in 2017. There are, because it's a 4-bedroom, 4 parking spaces are required, and 4 parking spaces are provided, with 2 in the garage and 2 in the existing driveway. And this property is located in the RPPP boundaries, which means on-street parking would not be available as long as this would be operated as a short-term rental use. Items 23 through 26 are by Long Creek LLC. Saw another unit previously in this agenda at 4005 Atlantic Avenue, units 110, 111, 220, and 212. Recommended for approval by Staff and Planning Commission. Each unit is 1 bedroom, and there is 1 dedicated parking space for each one. Item 27 is by Jacob Short at 4905 Mandan Road. Staff and the Planning Commission does recommend approval of this application. Existing single-family home built in 1962 with 3 bedrooms. 3 parking spaces would be required. 3 parking spaces are provided, with parking space number 3 in the driveway, but slightly overhanging the property line by 4 feet in order to accommodate the proposed parking space. Parking space 1 is in the carport, parking space 2 on the property, parking space 3, the majority of it on the property with again, part of it sticking off. And next, we'll go to the August 18th agenda. I'll let Bill Landfair take over with the pending planning items, regular planning items, and I'll take back over for the short-term rentals.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. We have 10 items scheduled for August 18th. First item is a request for a conditional use permit for a residential kennel to allow up to 30 dogs on a 14-acre parcel in the Princess Anne District. A conditional use permit for a residential kennel is required when more than 4 adult dogs are kept on the property. In this case, the dogs are kept primarily for hunting purposes. 3 will be companion dogs. The applicant is proposing to construct a 12 by 60-foot kennel on the property to house the dogs. The kennel will maintain a minimum setback of 100 feet from the nearest property line and will be constructed of masonry to attenuate sound. There are no records of complaints filed with the City Animal Control Office, and staff is not aware of any opposition. 2 letters of support have been received. Next item is a request for a modification of conditions to permit a new car wash located on South Military Highway north of the intersection with Indian River Road in the Kempsville District.
Mr. Mayor, can we go back just for a second?
Yes, sir.
Has anyone researched, that comes out about 55 square feet per dog. Has anyone looked, are there standards that are out from the various, I'll call it animal rights or hunting dogs or professional standards on what's the number of minimum square foot that a dog needs to have in order to, or an animal to have to consider to be a compatible space? It seemed to be, maybe 55 is right, but do we know? I'd like to have someone, I'm gonna do some of my own research, but I'd be interested to see
Okay.
what you find out, just to see that that's a
Okay.
lot of dogs in a small space. Would you
Yes,
like
sir,
to
it
be a
is.
5-foot cubicle 24/7? Probably not.
Yeah, it's one of the larger applications for a residential kennel that we've seen. We'll look into that.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, Ms. Abbott.
Do we know, it sounded like when you said it's gonna be made of brick, it's gonna be completely indoor?
Yes, there will be space for the dogs to be outside at times, but the structure itself will be enclosed and they'll
And
be
temperature
inside.
controlled, I presume?
We believe so, yes. Yes, they have an existing facility in Chesapeake, and they had shared some photographs with us that looked to be conducive to the good care of the dogs.
I'd like to know specifically if it's
Sure.
temperature controlled. Thank you.
Next application is a request for a conditional use permit for a car wash facility previously approved for the site back in 2007. The applicant is now requesting a modification of conditions to redevelop the property with a new car wash building measuring 3,300 square feet in size. Multiple points of ingress and egress will be reduced to a single point of ingress-egress on the south side of the property. There will be no direct access proposed from South Military Highway. There is a legally non-conforming freestanding display sign in the southwest corner of the site. Consistent with the practice of addressing such non-conforming signs, a condition is recommended requiring removal of the sign and that all new signage comply with the current regulations. The applicant is agreeable to this condition. There is no known opposition.
Mayor?
Yeah.
I have a question. Can you explain, how is traffic gonna get into that? You
Yes.
said it's not gonna be on Military Highway.
Correct. There is a, this is actually, There's an easement along the south side of the property that has existing access onto South Military Highway. And through that easement, they will have their access, full right in and right out.
The cars will be turning off Military Highway to turn in
Correct.
through the easement.
That's right.
Isn't that kind of close to the intersection, or is it just how it looks on the map?
Well, we believe it's sufficient distance away from the intersection not to impact the intersection, but we also believe that vehicles will be able to come from the other direction, and we suspect that they'll be queuing up a little bit within this easement area. But there's also plenty of queuing area on the site itself. We
Thank you.
believe that the new arrangement, the new site design actually is more conducive to controlling the on-site movements than the existing condition.
Thank you.
There's no known opposition to this application. Next application is a request for a conditional use permit for an automobile service station at the Brenneman Farm Shopping Center in the Kempsville District. The conditional use permit will allow the applicant to construct 14 fuel pumps and a kiosk. Staff had recommended a condition prohibiting outdoor vending machines and/or the display of merchandise. However, the Planning Commission recommended a new condition, Condition 9, to permit these uses if they were screened from view of the right-of-way and approved by the Planning Director. We believe this will make them consistent with the retail design guidelines. There is no known opposition to this application. However, there was one speaker at the Planning Commission hearing who had concerns with the timing of the existing traffic signal. City Traffic Engineering is looking into these concerns. Next item will be included in the director's briefing immediately to follow this update. The next item, at the request of the applicant, has been rescheduled to August 25th. Item 6 is a request for a special exception for alternative compliance to permit recurring outdoor assembly use and open-air market special events. The nature of programming and events hosted by the Virginia Beach Convention Center and Sports Center requires flexibility. The special exception for alternative compliance is requested to accommodate rapid setups for events on a continual basis without the need for additional administrative approvals. Those events requiring temporary road closures will continue to follow special events permitting application and review processes. Events will average 250 to 500 attendees, with some events accommodating as many as 1,500 attendees. There's no known opposition. If there are no questions, I will now turn the briefing back over to the director.
I only have one, if I could, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moss.
If you could look back, because I'd like to know if anyone else has applied for something similar to this that we have denied in the last 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Wood.
Are there any more questions on this? Okay, Mr. Mayor, the city attorney's advised me that for these two items that I should depart the room because I have a conflict with both of the ones in the director's
Okay.
brief, so.
Great. Mr.
Mr.
Wilson.
Mayor, may I ask a question?
Okay.
Which one are you
Yes, sir.
going to brief first?
I still have short-term rentals to go over.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I still have 3 or 4 short-term rental items to go over on the agenda first before we go to the next presentation.
What did he say?
He's got 3 or 4 short-term rentals
Oh.
before he goes to the presentation.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Apologize for the confusion on that. We do have, on the August 18th agenda, we do have other short-term rental applications, items 7 through 11, 4 recommended for approval by staff and the Planning Commission on the consent agenda, and 1 recommended for approval that was heard by the Planning Commission.
Excuse me, Bobby, Ms. Wilson?
Oh, I was just going to say on the Westminster, I have a conflict too, so.
Okay,
We'll get ready to talk about that.
okay, we'll talk about that. Okay.
I'll be getting up.
Okay, I will go through these items fairly quickly. First item is by Casey Krumke at 133 Acas Avenue. Again, staff and Planning Commission recommended approval of this request for a short-term rental. Existing home built in 1995 with 3 bedrooms. They are proposing 3 parking spaces on site to meet the parking requirements. On-street parking is available to handle any overflow parking that could potentially happen with the use. Item number 8 is by 3D Builder Investments LLC in the Beach District of 421 21st Street. This is a request for one 4-bedroom unit of a duplex constructed in 2019. 2 parking spaces are provided on site with 2 additional spaces to be leased from the 25th Street garage, which is within a quarter-mile walking distance to the existing site. Next item is by John and Kristen Lovering at 1718 Baltic Avenue. Staff and Planning Commission recommends approval. This request is for one 2-bedroom unit within an existing 14-unit condominium that was constructed in 1984. 2 parking spaces are provided on site directly in front of the unit, and 2 parking spaces are required for the proposed use. The property does lie in the RPP boundaries, which will prohibit and limit the availability of on-street parking. Next item is by Timothy Hanlon. This is at 2541 Seaview Avenue in the, that's not the Beach District, that should be Lynn Haven. Apologize. Not Lynn Haven either, that should be Bayside. This is a 4-bedroom, single-family home constructed in 1980. 4 parking spaces are provided on the site, with 3 in the driveway, with 1 located underneath this existing deck, second-floor deck, and 1 in the garage proposed. If you remember previously, there was an item that was to the south that was reviewed by the City Council a few weeks ago.
Mr. Belucci.
It could be, Mr. Tahana, it could be just a matter of the angle of the photo, but do you know is that garage, I mean, I see a large truck next to a very small door.
So there is an existing, this item here is a screen for the HVAC unit and to elevate it as well. We do have a picture that's part of the staff report that has a vehicle shown in the garage showing that it can fit. So it does appear to be small, but it is the angle of the picture.
Maybe it's a small garage and it's a bad angle.
Yes, I would agree. That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
And item number 11 is by Michael James Fitzgibbon at 2222 Eastbury Circle. Staff and Planning Commission recommends approval of this request. It's an existing 3-bedroom unit of one side of a duplex that was constructed in 2009. 3 parking spaces are required, with 3 parking spaces being provided on site, with 1 being located in the garage and the other 2 located in the driveway on the private property. With that, I will pause for any questions.
Any question, Mr. Moss?
Just so I know, we're having these 2 meetings at the convention center, correct?
Correct.
So I now know we have another set of rules we're probably operating under, maybe or maybe not. But I just want to know, are we going to do, and then there's going to be like a 20-minute break or a 15 break to reset? Because I'm thinking all the people coming down for short-term rentals, if we're going to be doing, whether it's Westminster Canterbury, or it's going to be Thalia, those are going to be fairly long and abbreviated things. So, how are we going to work that so that people that are there for that come to that, and people who have a short-term rental aren't sitting there maybe for 2 or 3 hours waiting for us to get to the short-term rental piece? I mean, we might not have the answer now, but I think we need just to think about, how we want to think about that for the public's convenience, not ours, but for the people who are attending, how we might think to work that out.
We will get together with the city clerk, and, usually when we have these type of situations, we do work out the logistics, in terms, and we definitely want to make sure that everybody's going to be accommodated. One of the reasons we, deferred meeting here versus the convention center, Mr. Moss, was obviously to accommodate a large turnout that we anticipated. But even with the space, perhaps provisions for waiting in the lobby or, comfortably and things of that nature. But, I'm sure that we're going to be able to accommodate.
I wasn't referring to that piece of it, because I think the monument thing worked very well, and everybody should be complimented for how well that worked, and there was sort of plenty of spaces still to go. I was more concerned about the wait time. If you have we have one big issue that's a block, and it's going to be, I think, robustly discussed, I think.
Correct.
And then we have a bunch of other things that are these short-term rental pieces. And so you have a choice. You can put the big thing up front, and you can, and get them done, and you can say, and the second block isn't gonna happen till 8:30, even if we get done early, you wait till and people know where they're at, so they're not, I'm thinking of people coming to the meeting and waiting, not that the space can't accommodate the people,
Right.
but they're coming down and just sitting or standing or whatever they're doing. That's what I was thinking of, sir.
Yeah, we're anticipating a long meeting, but once again, we're gonna do, we are going to accommodate everybody. Ms. Barnes, any comment?
Mayor, obviously, we will work with you and council and go at the direction, but normally we would just have the large item at the very end of the agenda and deal with consent agenda items and those smaller items before the larger item. But however.
Yeah, I think that, might be the thing to do, and, but then we can alert people accordingly, but once again, we intend to accommodate and allow everybody, both proponent and opponent, the fair opportunity. Okay. All righty, thank you.
And that finishes our presentation on the pending planning items.
Okay. In that vein, Mr. Manager, we have, two presentations, coming up now because of the complexity, and we certainly welcome the opportunity for the council to hear, and then also to have a discussion now, too, that, this way we are going to be thoroughly, better, prepared as we go into, what's going here. So we welcome these items, and, but once again, to be assured that both of these items that we're going to talk about now, are complex, and, the fact that we're going to accommodate both of them at the convention center, I think it would be helpful now to get some information out there, so thank you. Okay. Bobby?
I'm leaving. I object to this whole process. I'll talk about it under old business, but this is unfair to the people, and I'm not staying.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moss.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. We'll go on to the presentation for the pending planning items. If we can have that on the screen, please. Thank you. As the mayor noted, due to the complexity of these items, these were in the pending planning items that were previously discussed. And however,
Bobby, hold off before Mr. Jones want to make a comment.
I have a conflict on this item, so I'm going to have to leave.
Okay. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Sabrina. Hey, folks. Yeah, okay.
I believe Mr. Tower is participating by WebEx, so you still have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, appreciate this, Mr. Jones.
This isn't gonna be a vote of 6 people, is it?
No, there's
no, ma'am.
No, there's no vote at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, when is the vote?
It looks to me like I've heard of at least 3 people who have indicated on the Westminster item that they have a conflict, so that would mean the 8 of you would be remaining to vote.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, Bobby, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. First item that I will try to quickly brief is the Westminster of Canterbury application on Chesapeake Bay at 3100 Shore Drive on properties located at the intersection of Starfish Road and Ocean Shore Avenue. Westminster of Canterbury and Chesapeake Bay has been operating at this site, providing continuing care campus since 1977. They have an existing conditional use permit for their larger property to provide these services. The request is to modify the existing conditional use permit to incorporate these 2 parcels here, 1 an existing parking lot and 2 an existing condominium and restaurant that was purchased by the applicant. The proposal is to add to the campus and to supplement the existing 14-story continuing care retirement community. They are proposing to construct on the Chesapeake Bay side, on the north side of the property, a 22-story independent living building and a 7-story healthcare building, which is located on that existing parking lot to the south across Ocean Shore Avenue. With the proposal, they are proposing to relocate an existing beach access, which aligns with Starfish Road, which is here, and they're proposing to relocate it to this side of the property line, to the eastern property line. You have existing elevations of the proposed property. With this diagram here, you can see the proposal of the relocated beach access. Again, the approximate location of the existing beach access is from these existing crosswalks that align with the sidewalk on Starfish Road going towards the beach. Subsequent to the Planning Commission public hearing, the applicant has provided staff with a new submittal outlining what appears to be dealing with some of the concerns of the community. Staff is not available to discuss any of these particular items at length as far as what the applicant is proposing, but they did attempt to pull away from the eastern property line with different types of features with their proposed development, as well as altering some of the proposed crosswalks that they have, which would require encroachments that would also have to be approved by the city council. The applicant is also proposing a 8-foot masonry wall along the edge of this beach access here to mitigate sound, and they were proposing to provide a sound attenuation for the existing properties. Here are the renderings of the proposed project that have been provided to staff. This is the 7-story healthcare building facade, which is on the south side at the corner of Starfish Road and Ocean Shore. And this is the proposed 22-story independent living building facade. The applicant provided a shade study, a shadow study to provide to the Planning Commission in order to determine if there is impacts based on their proposed building. Based on their testimony at the Planning Commission, during the summer months, the impact will be less than what would be the impacts in the months of February and October. Here's the existing campus, looking down Ocean Shore Drive. This is the existing parking lot where the future healthcare building will go. Along this row of parking is the relocation of the proposed easement, and the tower is proposed to be on the eastern side of that property. It will require, the proposal will require future action by the City Council. One will be the encroachments of the proposed crosswalks that are shown here, which go over Starfish Road as well as Ocean Shore Avenue. Those will require encroachments as well as the approval of the relocation of the existing beach access easement. With that, I will stand by with any questions.
Any questions, any discussion among Ms. Henley?
These revisions that were they made at the request or the recommendation of the Planning Commission discussion, or?
No, ma'am. It appears that the applicant had tried to address some of the concerns that were brought forward by those that were in opposition of the application.
So these were not prepared at the time that the Planning Commission heard it?
No, ma'am. These were submitted after the Planning Commission public hearing.
Okay, anybody else? All right, Bobby, I think that'll do that for there, okay? So.
Does that include the audience, Mayor?
No, sir. Sir, this is a briefing by the city manager. You'll have opportunity, during the vote on next Tuesday, to voice.
Can I just ask one more thing?
No, sir.
Done.
Sir, with due respect.
Done?
Okay, okay, let me go get the folks that might be able to come back. Mr. Jones is on the way back, and then we can proceed with failure. Okay, Bobby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item is scheduled for the August 18th hearing that will be held at the Convention Center. I do want to apologize. The memo that was crafted by myself and my staff had a date incorrect on the transmittal. Although these items were properly listed in the pending planning items, I do apologize for any confusion that was had over that date. The application is by Thalia Road Partners LLC at 4216 and 4220 Virginia Beach Boulevard in the Lynn Haven District. The applicant is proposing a conditional rezoning of the property located at the northeast corner of Thalia Road and Virginia Beach Boulevard to go from B2 Community Business District to conditional B4 Mixed Use District in order to redevelop the property with 3 new buildings that will contain 261 multifamily dwelling units and an up to 6,500 square feet of additional retail on the existing site. This is the aerial photo of the property. It's a 9.30 acre property with frontages along Virginia Beach Boulevard and Thalia Drive. The existing property is developed with a 1,900 square foot grocery store, approximately 65,000 square feet of a furniture store and warehouse, and approximately 32,000 square feet of retail, office, and restaurant uses. This is the existing site where the existing Aldi sits, and also the existing retail establishment that's at the corner of Thalia and Virginia Beach Boulevard. These 2 buildings are proposed to be remained with the proposed development. These existing buildings here are the offices and retail that are proposed to be removed, along with the Willis Wayside furniture store. The proposed plan, again, is proposing to maintain the existing grocery store and the freestanding commercial building at the corner of Thalia Road and Virginia Beach Boulevard. They are proposing to construct a 261 multifamily dwelling with up to 6,500 square feet of new commercial uses that will be located on this portion here of the parking area underneath the proposed residential. The applicant is proposing 553 parking spaces, which is less than the minimum number required, which is 614. The applicant did submit a shared parking analysis to show that their proposed parking would be acceptable, and staff accepted that proposed parking analysis. Here's the proposed elevation. These are architectural renderings of the elevation as well. These are existing, the proposed townhouse units that they propose at the rear of the property. They've broken the building into 3 sections. Building 1, which is four floors of multifamily with parking underneath and retail underneath. This building 2 that they have labeled here is also proposed to be 4 stories of multifamily with parking underneath. And then these units in the back are proposed to be townhouse dwelling units, townhouse style units in the multifamily development with parking space located within the garage. Subsequent to the Planning Commission public hearing, the applicant resubmitted a new plan revising their parking layout to add 45 additional parking spaces. That time, with the proposed additional 45 parking spaces, they would now be deficient 16 parking spaces from the minimum parking standard. However, with the proposed shared parking agreement, based on those calculations, staff still deems that the proposed parking is acceptable. With that, staff is prepared to stand by and answer any questions.
Any other questions? Ms. Abbott?
Since we're on the parking page, is the Aldi's parked is it 1 per 1,000 for grocery store?
It's
Or 5 per 1,000 per grocery store?
it should be, I think it's due to the square footage, it's parked, due to the mix of the proposal, it is considered a shopping center, which is calculated at 1 parking space per 250 square feet.
So is the parking that in the Aldi's considered to be shared parking with the redevelopment?
That is what the applicant is proposing, yes.
Okay, and then it'll be deficient 16 spaces for the apartments or deficient 16 spaces for all of the uses combined?
If you were to take the raw number that was required for the required parking, it would be 16 spaces short for all of the proposed uses. However, due to the proposed peak times that were provided by their traffic engineer, staff does agree that there is an ability for internal capture as well as the peak times to be different where parking can be shared.
Do you have an analysis of when you think the peak times will be that you can provide to us, showing when they think parking will come and go?
I believe the city manager provided staff's analysis, which included the parking study from which the applicant took from a resource that what the parking demand is. I believe it's in the final proposed parking analysis they have.
I'll look over that again. And then as far as the surface of the development, do you know what the current percentage of the lot is impervious?
I do not believe I have that right now, ma'am.
If you don't have it today, just at a future date, I'd like to know what the current, as it stands right now, what percentage is impervious surface, and then what this new proposal, how it changes. And then, is there a current, do you know what the current stormwater management system is for the lot as it exists today?
So there is an existing, and Mr. Moss had brought this up previously, there's an existing stormwater management facility that is located here on the property.
Oh, is that the one that there's upkeep issues?
Yes, ma'am. That was constructed to accommodate this proposed, when this retail was constructed. When the Aldi was constructed, they did what was considered a 10% reduction, where they reduced their impervious cover by 10% to meet the stormwater requirements as allowed by code.
I assume that the apartment will underground?
That is correct. In the proposal, during their preliminary stormwater analysis, they provided us showing that they will provide underground storage in this parking area here.
And how do we, have we put that through our model to see what?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I get a copy of that too? Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Ms. Henley?
Just so I can be clear on what I'm seeing, currently, all of this is zone B2,
Yes, ma'am.
and the proposal is to zone all of it B4.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it currently all under the same ownership?
There is a property line, I believe, which comes through right here, which I believe there is a separate property owner.
But the proposal would have it all under one ownership?
That is correct.
So the proposed change would have all of this under the same ownership, and the Aldi's and the existing retail will remain,
Yes, ma'am.
and the change will be the apartments around those facilities.
Correct. And 6,500 square feet of retail added.
And
6,500 square feet of retail that will also be added in the podium here.
okay. And it will be all under one ownership.
That is my understanding. The applicant can speak to that when this comes up.
Okay. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Tahan, has there been a rebuttal package? Was that included, submitted to Planning Commission?
It is my understanding there was a package submitted by the civic organization that was submitted to the Planning Commission. However, my staff never received, that I'm aware of, my staff never received a copy of it.
Right. I'd like to get a copy of that as quickly as possible. Since I've been elected, I've seen controversial items like this move from pending planning items to the city manager's briefing. That is something common that I've seen since I've been on council. And in fact, I know with this particular item, we have deferred this item and even moved it to the convention center to accommodate the large crowds, as you stated, Mr. Mayor. So we know there are really strong objections and concerns about this particular item. But I want to get to the root of the issue that I have here. I am bothered by the accusatory language about the show of favoritism by the newly elected city manager. In fact, I'm kind of bewildered as to why a sitting council member will put that perception out there into the community. Then I start to ask myself, how can a newly outside hire that's been on the job for 2 weeks show favoritism for an item that's been on the agenda for months? I don't believe that council should further inflame controversial or highly controversial items by implying favoritism. I find the words like the procedural act of favoritism problematic, irresponsible, and highly inflammatory. And if there's an issue with the agenda and its structuring, or with the lack of oppositional views in the briefing, then state it. But to imply favoritism or the appearance of or procedural favoritism on the part of anyone or newly outside hire, to me is just thoughtless. And lastly, I would argue that the public already distrusts this council decision-making process. Just ask the primary residents of short-term rentals who follow every letter of the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
I would just comment that, you know, I don't see this being treated any differently than all of the other items that we get an overview on, except they were pulled out to be put together, and maybe that just made the perception that something different was going to be done. From what I've heard today, I don't hear anything different than what we normally hear in just the overview package. I was a little confused as to why they were pulled out. Maybe they shouldn't have been. They're just the usual overview to let us know what's coming.
Yes, I agree. Mr. Bellucci.
Mr. Mayor, I wasn't planning to speak, but I do feel compelled, after hearing Mr. Rouse's comments, to agree with his statement about the need for having reasoned, measured, civil dialogue about the issues that we face that come before us. And whether one supports an application or a concept or they don't, let's be reasonable in our discussions. And if you're going to level an accusation about impartiality or favoritism, then provide the evidence to support it. And in the case that I've been hearing about prejudice toward an application, or that in that even including the city manager may be displaying favoritism toward one project, when, as Mr. Rouse pointed out, he's been on the job for a very short period of time, came from outside our community, would not be inclined by any way I could imagine to be prejudicial before any projects we have, is just unfair, not only to the manager, but also to the process. So I just ask our colleagues here and the public, it's fine to disagree. It's reasonable to disagree. But let's base that disagreement in facts, and let's not prejudice the discussion with accusations that are unfounded. Thank you.
Anybody else?
If I would just make one more comment, you know, it's really, this is just one more of those things that is happening differently because of this COVID. You know, we're moving it to the convention center so we can social distance. And that makes it appear that we're giving particular attention to these two issues. But the fact of the matter is, if it weren't for the COVID, it would all be held right here in the same council chambers that we hold everything else. We would just do what we usually do, and that is manage the crowd. And it's unfortunate that it appears that there's something different. Well, the difference is we're trying to accommodate all of the people who want to come down and speak in a safe fashion by social distancing. And I hope we're going to get that microphone down there so that
We're working on
easier
that
to
for you,
hear,
Ms. Henley.
because I couldn't hear very well Thursday night, and I don't want to sit through two controversial rezonings and not be able to hear the speakers. We've got to do better than that. And I had my ears checked. They're okay. So it's the microphone or something, the acoustics. It's just too bad. I mean, this virus has just caused us to do a lot of things differently, and it's messing us all up. But I don't believe at this point that these two applications have had any particular special attention except to try to accommodate the crowd with the virus.
Yep, Mr. Jones?
Well, I was the one that asked the city clerk to arrange for the two items to be at the convention center exactly for the reasons Ms. Henley just espoused, and that is so that we could accommodate what was perceived at least to be a much larger group of citizens coming to be able to make their comments. And I still believe that's the right thing to do. As far as the physical situation there, I'm like Ms. Henley. I really had a lot of trouble hearing the speakers last week, and I was wondering if we could move the platform that's in the middle out, or where the podium could come up closer to the council members, where we could hear them better. I think there's a combination of issues. The speakers were too far away, number one, and number two, it's such a big room that the sound doesn't concentrate, it just dissipates out into the size of the room. So if we could get the microphone somehow where the speakers could come up closer to us. I'll tell you a little funny story. After last week and the week before, I actually went to the ear doctor to find out if I was having trouble hearing. And the doctor said I was fine, so I think it must be the room, so.
Mr. Jones and members of council, I will tell you that I have been on the phone working with with the convention center staff, and we're trying to accommodate and adjust as best we can. I think a lot of it is the acoustics in the room. It's so large, but we are going to come up with different options and work on it before, obviously, August the 4th.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation.
Yes, sir.
I know.
Thank you.
But if we could try to move the speaker, somehow get the speaker closer to the.
We're working through it and trying to improve it, for sure.
And members of council, I'd like to also add that several of you reached out to me after last week's meeting and asked that we take more active COVID-19 precautions because we weren't wiping down the microphones like we do here. So staff is going to work on making sure that each speaker, the microphone is wiped down after they speak to the council.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just ask one more unrelated thing. I love this shield. Is it legal? I mean, is it as effective as the mask?
It's a facial covering that's accepted, you know, especially in healthcare workers.
Wearing these masks is also hampering the ability to understand people, because I guess we do more lip reading than we like to admit, but this is neat, if it's okay.
Yeah. Okay, and Mr. Donahue, if I can say that, you know, since I've been here, since 2004, the planning department has a legacy of professional excellence and integrity, and that is manifested by Mr. Tahana and his staff right now. You know, so I just wanted to go on record and saying that. Bobby, thank you for all you've done, and I truly appreciate the logistical situations that you've been going through, and with the short-term rentals and 2 projects of this magnitude. Kudos on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, we're definitely working on it. Just not exactly sure how we'll fix it all. So is it, will it go to the house as well? It should. So will you mention it to, will you email me the minutes of the thanks. Okay. Yeah, and you can have
I missed you guys.
and that's another thing, I wanna keep the meeting.
Okay, any council comments at this point?
I'll yield to Mrs. Henley.
Uh,
I do too. When they're
Okay.
I know that we're just meeting a lot, we're meeting every week and so forth. At what point do we do
the thing that we normally do with those, the liaison reports. We haven't been including those. There was just some important things.
You can mention them during council comments if you would like, but we'll make sure that we'll,
That's usually just the first meeting of the
usually the
month.
first meeting of the month, but you can certainly
Happens
bring it up
before
during council comments, Ms. Finley.
Well, I'll just mention now, because the Ag Advisory Commission only meets quarterly, and it had not met, of course, in April, so the meeting that was had this month was a very lengthy, action-packed meeting with a lot of things that were discussed. A couple of them have to do with some adjustments that are thought that if we make some relatively minor adjustments to the Ag Reserve Program, it would make some properties eligible that we would like to acquire. But then there were a couple of really major issues that were brought to the Ag Advisory Commission, and I just want you all to know that it's out there. If you hear about it, it's going to take some looking. There is a lot of interest in from the companies for some solar activities in the ag area that would require some adjustments, changes. You know, folks can call something a farm, and it doesn't have a thing in the world to do with food production. And so there's that question of what is compatible with agriculture and that kind of thing that now needs to be looked at. You know, you can build a building and make it designed to look like a barn, but if it's not doing anything with livestock or maintaining the farm equipment, it's not a barn. So you have to kind of watch the language of what is applied to things, and that's what's occurring. There's another application that's been around, or a proposal, it's not an application yet, it's been around for about a year. Some of you may have heard. It's a nonprofit, a new nonprofit that would like to do some hydroponic. Hydroponic is certainly a legitimate agricultural production, but the catch here is that they want to do it in the ITA on some city-owned property and so forth. So I just want you all to know that those things are being looked at, so that if you hear about it, you won't think that the Ag Advisory Commission is doing something subversive. These are things that have come to the commission, and if any of you want to follow those things, just want you to know they're out there. Of course, the commission only meets quarterly, so it won't meet again until October. If you have interest in these things or questions, please let me know, and I'll let you know what's out there and what the background is, and you can follow them.
Thank you. Mr. Moss.
Yeah,
And then Mr. Wood.
I shared with members of council, you probably saw this in your packet, it was the Congressional Research Service analysis on the economic impact of COVID-19. I don't know if any of you all have a chance over the weekend to peruse it or not, but getting to a question I talked about earlier today on page 53 of that report, getting back to what has been the effect of all the economic stimulus from the federal government to fill in the gap between the economy's real performance and what they'd like to see. Personal income in April rose by 10%, also lagging data, but largely due to an 88% increase in income payments from federal economic recovery programs. So that just shows you just what a significant impact those federal payments have had to basically, people can't really see what's really happening because of that false economy. But also interesting, personal consumption fell by 13.6% overall, but personal savings rates are up 33%. That's both the $600 a week plus the $1,200 payments. So I think that when you look at some of this stuff and look at the projections for economic growth, I don't think we're going to see this big down, but what's really clear is it's taking tremendous fiscal stimulus, $3 trillion worth so far, to prop up nominal values and the current level of consumption. So at some point in time, as we look at this, the Fed's ability to keep providing, that next dose of fiscal stimulus like a drug ends, and so we have to really be looking at those fundamental aspects of our economy, and so we don't get caught up thinking that this federal stimulus gains are permanent. They are not structural sources of revenue. And then under old business, I'm going to talk about planning items under old business. today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moss. Mr. Wood.
Yeah, I passed around an ordinance that I'm suggesting that the council put on the agenda at some point, perhaps next week. And this is regarding the ordinance to authorize the use of CARES Act funding to provide hazard pay and volunteer recognition. The only change I would make on this, from my perspective, is starting at line 40, the word, if you see the word recognition on that line, scratch off everything from that point forward, activities such as to that word, because it's rescue squads for recognition only. So I just wanted to share this with everybody, and if anybody wants to co-sponsor it with me, feel free. And
I got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, Mr. Rouse.
Would it be, and this is for discussion on this, I know a lot of our staff telecommutes right now, or teleworking, but there's still significant who do have strong interaction with the public right now.
So
Would they be?
Mr. Dehaney can probably address that, because we had this conversation earlier.
Okay. I was just wondering, would that be included in this or no?
He can tell you.
To the members of council, this only includes those employees that can directly be covered under hazard pay pursuant to the CARES Act.
Okay.
We did go through an exercise to try to identify ways to compensate the rest of the workforce, but looking at that and looking at the financial and the fiscal impacts that we're facing, we'd rather wait till after we close out the books and see how our revenues are projecting to take up something to possibly consider in December or January to see if we can do something similar for our employees.
In that case, Mr. Wood, I'd like to co-sponsor with you as well.
Okay, and put me down too, Jim.
So would I.
Does anybody not want to
Here.
have the name on it?
I do have a question.
Over here.
Mr. Moss.
I would hope when the resolution's in the packet, that part of the background would be that the city manager would have a brief narrative of the methodology that he used and how we determined this, just so the public would know and employees would know, how we drove the line and why we drew the line where we did.
And Mr. Council, can I add one more thing as well? It's also important to note that these employees were the employees that were not afforded the opportunity to take advantage of the very generous leave time that we afforded to our employees, our regular non-sworn or public safety employees during COVID-19. So these employees were not allowed to have an additional 6 weeks of vacation or allowed to work from home. These are the ones that directly always had to show up and work and directly deal with the citizens as we traverse this pandemic.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Councilmember Tower has his virtual hand raised. I believe he'd like to make a comment. Mr. Tower, if you go ahead with your comments, please.
Thank you, Amanda. I thought perhaps this was the right time. I don't want to take a lot of time. I apologize for not being there in person, but I was feeling under the weather today, and I thought I should be safe as possible and keep everybody away from me and me away from you today. I'd like to speak just a little bit on short-term rentals. I've spoken about it before, and I'm not going to go through all the arguments pro and con, but I find that the current conditions that we are imposing automatically on short-term rentals are insufficient to protect our long-term residents who want quiet, peaceful place to live, just like all of us do, with very few exceptions. I understand the arguments on both sides that property owners want the right to make money, and indeed, Virginia Beach depends on tourism, and a good short-term rental stock probably adds materially to our ability to attract tourists. But the problem's not going to go away anytime soon. There are efforts being made to fix it, but they're not here yet. And in the interim, I thought that I would just tell you in advance that, at least with respect to properties in the Beach District, and I really don't know why I would discriminate for other properties, I think we have two areas that need immediate specific attention. One is the number of people allowed per bedroom. I think 3 is too many. I think 2 is the right number. And the other is, and this is more difficult to do, I think, troubles me more, but I still think it needs to be resolved in favor of the neighborhoods and the homeowners, the neighbors of a short-term rental. And that is the number of times that the property can be rented. At 2 times a week with no restriction on the total rentals, you're talking about properties being able to turn over more, 100 times in a year. That's just too many people coming and going for many, many, many of our neighborhoods. So I'm going to propose for any of the ones that I vote to approve that a condition be imposed that the number of the properties be restricted to 2 people per bedroom and enforcement be implemented that enforces that restriction, as well as the 1 rental per week. I don't come to that easily, as I said, because I really do have a very deep appreciation of the tension that we have here, but I think we're out of whack right now. I hope we come up with a better way, and I hope the Planning Commission and other members of council will help do that. I'm sure they will, but for the moment, that's what I'm going to suggest. Thank you.
You have to, finish your.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish up on this thing. So, do I understand it then, this will be requested by council? Is everybody okay with that?
Does anybody object? Okay. Mr. Tower, are you on board with Mr. Wood's resolution?
Yes.
If you could just make that one correction or one change on the bottom, and if it's a will of council, I'd like to put it on for next week if we can do it. Going back to something Mr. Tower said, I don't know if Mr. Jones wants to talk about it or not, but he and I actually had a specific meeting with the city attorney today to talk about overlays and things like that. I don't know if you want to talk about it, Louis.
Mr. Wood or Mr. Jones?
Well, as Mr. Wood said, we had a meeting with the city attorney this morning before the council meeting, and we're proposing the changes to the short-term rental ordinance that we have alluded to in the past. And I have no real problems with what Mr. Tower suggested, so I would, with his suggestion, I would suggest, Mr. Wood, that we try to inculcate what he said, what he brought up into the ordinance that we're working with, so.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Okay? Ms.
I
Henley?
would just like to comment that, the council, I guess, 2 years ago, when Mr. Jones was acting mayor, spent every meeting, a certain length of time, talking about short-term rentals. And I think we had first agreed on 2 people per bedroom and not more than once a week.
Yeah.
And then that sort of got undone. That's been a lot of my problem, too much and too many. And now if we could just make sure we get our enforcement in place, I think we'll have a much better opportunity. And if you add this to the overlays, I think we can make a great improvement over what we're doing.
I think that would be a great idea. Okay? Anybody else at this point? Okay, how about the agenda review?
The agenda review is extraordinarily simple today. Items 3 and 4 under ordinances or resolutions are the only things that could potentially be on the consent agenda. Is everybody okay with those 2?
No planning items?
No.
Okay.
I have to abstain on item 1.
And I just.
Item 1 is going to be heard.
Well, the first 2 will be heard, and
Okay,
all
so-
planning items.
Items E1 and E2 and F1 through 10 are going to be heard.
Okay.
So items E3, ordinance to grant a non-exclusive franchise Kitty Hawk Wind LLC, and 4, ordinance to authorize temporary encroachments in the city's right-of-way at Cape Henry and Shore Drive.
Okay?
And then I just, Mr. Mayor, on E2, I just passed out an adjustment to that. When we were discussing it during our council discussions, we talked about removing some of the language that was favorable to one side versus the other. So I had asked the city attorney to remove that language, and it got missed in the agenda packet. So the updated resolution that's going around just removed lines 33 through 40, but the question itself did not materially change.
Okay, thank you.
And I wish to apologize to the council. Ms. Abbott did ask me for that well in advance, and that was an error on my part, for which I take responsibility and apologize to the council and to the public. The same text was also included in the agenda request form, and it has been pulled out of that in the copy that Ms. Abbott just passed around. And while I'm if I might, Mr. Mayor, during an earlier portion of this meeting, one council member suggested a desire to consider extending the period for suspension of penalties and interest on tax payments. I just want to point out that the current extension or the current suspension goes through August 1, which is next week. And so those penalties and interest for people who have not paid will will become due before you have another meeting.
Okay.
So I wanted council to be aware of that fact.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I ask, what was the change in this again? I didn't
The
hear.
original ordinance, we took out lines 33 through 40. So we just removed lines 33 through 40, which talked about the reason why different voting might be favorable. So it shouldn't be either way, it's just neutral.
Okay. All right, if it's okay, I'm going to move forward for the reading on the closed. Chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from the open meeting allowed by sections 2.2, 37, 11A Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes: public contract discussions of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds and discussion of the terms or scope of such contract where the discussion in open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A 29, dome site entertainment venue. Personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A1. Council appointments, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Abbott? Aye. Councilmember Berlucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye, but I will not be participating in the dome site part because I have a conflict of interest.
Yes, sir, we'll note for the record. Councilmember Rouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Tower? Session?
Thank you.
Councilmember Tower, would you, Mark, does he need to abstain?
Aye.
Well, he can vote.
The ayes have it, yes.
Should we ask him to abstain?
No, he can vote to go into close. He
Okay.
just will not be able to. He'll need to
You
make a
can't
statement
certify.
voting
Thank
coming
you.
out.
Okay. Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 11 to 0.
Okay, we are recessing into executive.